What's up, my fellow lionesses and lions? Welcome to the Project Lioness podcast, where we are here to disrupt the mainstream narrative when it comes to health, holism, and human consciousness. We are here to share bold truths about health and life from a female perspective. This episode is brought to you by our team, Inspire Co., where we stand for your health being inspired by choice rather than being inhibited by chance. Thank you for being here and joining in on these raw, real, and powerful conversations. We hope our show brings you inspiration and empowerment to overcome challenges, reclaim your life, and ultimately pursue your mission with power, purpose, and play. Now, let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Mel. Welcome back to the Project Lioness podcast. And today in this episode, I'm joined by an amazing human being, Dr. Loula, all the way from Greece, y'all. And she is here to share her journey of being a mom, a chiropractor, a sister, a person who loves just living life, a daughter, a friend, a healer, a business owner. She wears a lot of hats, y'all. And she really just loves being a human being. She's also a graduate of the Project Lioness Cohort. And I've really loved getting to know her over the years, and I'm so inspired by her and her ability to show up and keep doing the inner work. So Loula, welcome to the Project Lioness podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too. We're recording this, y'all, on a Friday. It's a Friday morning here in Minnesota. What time is it there in Greece, Loula?
It is 5 p.m.
5 p.m. So we're making sure that she can get this done and get home to her family and not be up till midnight. So very grateful. So Loula, tell us, I know, with Project Lioness, we have a lot of, women and I think some men who tune into the podcast, and a lot of them are chiropractors or healers or leaders. They are also parents, but something that I think is fun to talk about is how did you get into chiropractic first? And then we'll get into your journey of parenthood and motherhood.
Well, I first went to school and studied to be a physio. And towards the end, I was kind of like, not that inspired. I don't really like this. But my dad is also a physio. So he mentioned, why don't you look into osteopathy or chiropractic? He was just a physio and knew of chiropractic because where we live and in Greece general, there are very little chiropractors. So I looked into it. I went to see an osteopath and I went to see a chiropractor in Athens. And he is a Gonstead doctor, which I didn't know anything about at the time. And I just really, I liked the vibe. I liked, how he worked. I was like, I think I could do this. He didn't talk anything really about philosophy, but he did just adjust. So I was like, I'll just go and give it a go. So I went to England to study chiropractic, and there the school back then, and now even worse, is very medical orientated. So I went to chiropractic school not knowing really what chiropractic was. And then I remember there was this lecture from a Gonstead doctor, a teacher there, of the very few real chiropractors that taught there. And he was taking the piss and saying about the S word. And I was like, what is he talking about? What is this S word? And so that was the first time that somebody said, oh, it's subluxation, it's a historical concept. We don't do that anymore. So I was like, okay. Fast forward into clinic year, when I was actually seeing, people, there was this one case where this same tutor, the Gonstead doc, he was like, okay. So I was like, I can do rehab. I can do this with him. I can do this. He was like, what will happen if you only adjust him? And I was like, I don't know. Only that?
What are you talking about?
So this was like a core moment that got things spinning, which then led me to like I've been here for 4 years. I've studied so much, and where am I compared to when I finished my physiotherapy school? I can maybe move some bones. I couldn't even like adjust properly. Could move some bones, and I'm very good diagnostician.
Yeah.
This is it. Like this is chiropractic. So then I went searching, and I actually found what it was, I guess. And I was very lucky. So I wanted to, when I graduated, I wanted to go to Spain to work, because Spain had and has like lots of what we call, open room, high volume, and only adjust practices. So I was like, I'll go to Spain to actually learn how to adjust and see what this chiropractic really was. And things fell together, and I ended up in a clinic which did knee, chest, upper cervical work. So,
and for those of you who don't know what that is, by the way, whether you're a chiropractor or maybe you're someone who receives chiropractic, that's a, very powerful technique that works a lot with primarily, right, the upper cervical spine. And those of you who are clients of mine or practice members, we focus a lot on that, of the importance. So I think it's one of the more, you've got to do a lot of training essentially to get really proficient at that, right?
Yeah. So then I started, learning the philosophy and learning actually chiropractic.
And now you have your own practice. How long have you been in practice?
I came back to Greece 8 years ago, and I opened up my practice here. And then my sister she's also a chiropractor, and she joined me 5 years ago as well. So we work together here.
Family dynamics. I love it. Something I love that you shared, Loula, is just, that ability to ask the question, like, this is it. And even though maybe you didn't know that there's so much more to chiropractic, something in you actually did know, like your soul or that deep part of us that longs for those miracles as practitioners and as chiropractors to create that for the people we see. So I love, and that just says a lot about you. And I know I've reflected that to you, but your ability to continue going into the depths of like, okay, this is it. Like, how can I create more in my life or more for my patients or my practice members, and not necessarily doing more, but actually in chiropractic, less becomes more. Honestly, like the adjustment is enough. So I love that part of your story, and now transformed into a business owner.
Yeah.
Love that. So you guys have a practice in Greece, and I know you and I have talked about this even in Project Lioness. And for those of you who are business owners or chiropractors, we know that, not me experiencing this myself, but having kids and becoming a mom, I always say, for me at least, I don't know if you feel this, Loula, but my first baby has been my businesses. You birth in different ways as an entrepreneur, and it's nothing compared to physical birth. But tell us a little bit more. So you're in practice, you're in business, you're growing, and all of a sudden you become a mom. Maybe not all of a sudden, but you enter into this portal of motherhood. And I know when you filled out like our conversation before we hit record, you really felt like motherhood cracked you open, and the timing of that. And we'll get into like your journey in Project Lioness in a second, but I would love to hear what that was like for you, however raw or vulnerable you want to be, how it like shattered you, and you're in the process and have been in the process of like reconstructing who you are, or maybe even a new version of you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll agree that I felt, and I still feel, that my first baby was the clinic.
Totally.
For sure.
A lot of entrepreneurs will say that. They're like, this is my firstborn. If you chose to start a business before you had a child, I know it goes in reverse order.
So yeah, for sure. 100%. And then, I decided to become a mom. So I was pregnant and I had a perfectly, great pregnancy, working up until like a couple of weeks before my due date.
As chiropractors
do. That's why I mention it, because I'm sure chiropractors will listen.
Like, oh, I'm in labor and I just gave my lats adjustment. Time to give birth.
And really that being a chiropractor, that part was connected to a lot of even shame that I felt on how the birth went. So, I mentioned this about the fantasy and the nightmare. So knowing what I know now, I was living a fantasy with my pregnancy and how I had envisioned the birth and all the things that I had done to prepare. I thought to prepare myself, but the universe had other plans.
As it does.
So I got smacked really hard. Things came up. So there was a medical reason to consider induction. Mm-hmm. So I was 41 plus weeks. So I was like, okay, we'll go for the induction. Even until that point, in my mind, when I decided, okay, for the induction, in my mind, the worst scenario was like, I'm going to need an epidural probably. Because when you go that road, you probably have the oxytocin and stuff, and the pain is different. So you probably need the epidural. So I was like,
because we know that as
a failure.
Yeah. And I just want to speak before you continue. I think what you're speaking to is really important, because I think as chiropractors, we learn this really beautiful way of honoring the body, and birth is not a disease. It's a normal process. And yet I think sometimes, and I hear this, this isn't the first time I've heard this, we can get so infatuated with how we think things are supposed to go because we learned it in school, we learned it with our patients, and, we get so on our pedestal. And then all of a sudden, these things happen to get us to wake up to maybe a different reality, or sometimes what our patients go through too, right? And I see it, it's so fascinating. I see a lot with chiropractors, especially who are pediatrically focused, where they're like, this is the perfect birth. And they put so much pressure on them to like this or nothing else, which is that fantasy like you're talking about. And then it's like almost sometimes the opposite happens to get us to wake up, whether we want it or not. But you're speaking to something I think really powerful in that. So continue.
Yeah, so that was at that moment that the worst scenario in my mind was the epidural. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like 36, 40 hours later, no change, like no signs. And so about that time, after like 2 days, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go for a C-section because he has to get out now. So that's the only way out.
Yep.
So that was another, I'm going to say like a mini slap from the universe. And just then after that, there was just a cascade. So Mihaly is my son. And I didn't get to, touch him or
chest to chest.
Yeah, chest to chest or breastfeed him or hold him. They were saying he had to have a little bit, also English word. He had a little bit of like oxygen, and they were like, okay, we'll bring him like in 2 hours. And then like 8 hours later, I was like, where's the baby? Oh, the baby is in the NICU. NICU? Is that what you call it?
Yep. NICU. Yep. You got it.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? And at that moment, this was interesting now from from the work that we do. I literally felt my body go like it froze.
Wow. Which now looking back, we as, again, chiropractors, sometimes we know these things of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. But when you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, my body was responding intelligently in the moment, like too much energy and information that I'm perceiving to be a threat, boom, collapse. It's that, continue.
It was really amazing. In what sense? Like I say, like amazing.
Right. Because you've been able to look at the other side. Like some people, I think, still are stuck in that guilt and shame of how things went, and they have regrets, or they feel like, oh, I'm a chiropractor, this should have gone different. And I know the work you've done, and we'll get into that in a second, is like, how do we flip those perceptions where it's like, wow, that was actually such a beautiful, intelligent response. And I can love myself for that, especially as a mom, right? Like imagine how many moms walk around with that and still hold that guilt and shame and regret and anger or resentment or confusion of why did it go this way? Or could I've done something different, right? So again, just really important for our listeners to kind of hear, maybe you're a mom and you've gone through a similar experience like Loula, how to start to shift out of that. So continue.
Yeah. So I got the news that he's in the NICU, and then I'll say this because this is the chiropractic brain, and I was like, it's fine. Like, I've heard the stories. You go there, you adjust him, and he'll be out of there.
Yes. Yep. The greats,
we've
right?
all chiropractor, we've heard the stories.
And I think sometimes we all kind of secretly want that, right? Or like, I want to be that one that goes into the NICU and brings this child back to life because chiropractic, and it happens to be your child, right?
Yeah.
Gosh.
So that didn't happen. But anyway, so he had to stay, and even though, yes, they did take care of him, they didn't take great care of him. And so there were also medical errors that happened, which was even more frightening than for me. And anyways, he stayed in the hospital for 21 days. And then we went home together. So, and then when we went home, again, that persona in me, I was like, okay, now breastfeeding, like this has to work. Nothing else worked. So this has to work. And that was, again, like everything was just a slap, I'll say, like, because I had excruciating pain while breastfeeding and just knew that this can't be normal. And everybody, even professional help that I asked, they were saying, it's normal. You just have to, kind of like what they tell the people that come to us, you kind of like have to learn how to live with it.
Deal with it.
Yeah. And he had a tongue tie, which hadn't been diagnosed. So that in the end, it worked out well, but also it was like the cherry on top. So that made entering motherhood and parenthood with a lot of turbulence, I can say.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a word we use a lot in our cohorts, right? And I think, going through that, knowing what you know as a chiropractor, of course, there's these shattering of fantasies. I'm hearing these shattering of one way or nothing else. The absolutist type of thinking, the black and white. And now, of course, we know your son, your kiddo is great. How old is he now?
He's just over 2.
Just over 2.
Yeah. So in the highlights of toddlerhood, I guess.
Yeah. There'll be, I'm sure, more things that get slapped across the face. Good. Yeah. Eventually, those, turning those slaps into hugs. So what would you say? So then, okay. Because I came into, we started talking on Instagram, right? Is that how we connected?
Yeah, well, I bought. I knew of you. We still haven't met in person, but
Someday we will.
yeah. But I had been following you, and we were in the same groups like for many years before.
Yeah.
And then I bought the class about the cycle.
Yeah, Magic of Your Moon. Yep.
Yes. So I bought that, and then I didn't see it until like 2 months later. And I say this because of the synchronicity of things.
Right.
So I knew of you. I had been following you. I had seen the Project Lioness. I had no idea, obviously, like what it was, but I was kind of like intrigued by it. So I bought the cycle of the moon, and I saw it like 2 months later. And then, you have the form. So I filled out the form, and we had a discovery call. And on the form, I had said, you ask, a question like, is there anything else like you have questions or are you interested in? And I mentioned that I wanted to learn about the Project Lioness. Like, well, what is it? And you're like, oh, funny you asked. Like, it starts on Friday.
I remember you were literally like, and we'll tie it back to Loula's birth experience and shattering and recreating ourselves in a second. But you were literally like the week of our date. Loula just comes in somewhere from the universe, and it's like it was pretty divine, and it was, I think, meant to happen. It's interesting how people pop in at certain times when I'm in those enrollment phases, but yeah, it was just like boop 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 boop. All right, here we are.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things too that I notice the energy that's drawn to Project Lioness is people who have done a level of work, like you have. I know you've done a lot of discovery in the spiritual side of things and healing, and naturally, as we evolve as healers and chiropractors, there's always more to learn to become the best facilitator, not only for the people we serve, but our own life, right? Taking the wisdom that we invested in creating what we want for ourselves and our family. So we're getting into the cohort. And one of the things, y'all, I offer within Project Lioness is doing one-on-one sessions with people to help them clear their past baggage, to help them clear these emotional charges that we really from our past can drive our future. And that's something that Loula and I worked a lot on in the beginning, was certain aspects of her birth experience, certain aspects of how that ties into her vision and mission as a chiropractor and serving people. So I'm curious, Loula, as you got into the program, and not that you came in, like you weren't shattered and disheveled when you came in, definitely in a state of like pretty great embodiment. And there were still these like little things kind of lingering that we were able to dive into. So since joining the cohort, in that process, what were some of the things that you experienced in your own healing that you found have since translated to your family and your business and things like that?
Yeah, so I think what you said is also important. Like, I didn't feel like shattered when I started. So I had done what I needed to do, and I had really like felt that I had healed the wound. But so after having healed the wound, I was kind of like floating around, like, okay, this is taken care of and it's fine, it's healed. But like, how do I move on? Like, I'm not the person that I was. Like, who am I? What am I doing? So I think maybe now that I speak to it like that, an integration of everything, like everything came together, and the subtleties, which are not really subtleties, to work with that. And even though you say, yeah, I was embodied in a way, I think one of the main things with the work that we did was actually the embodiment part. And because maybe I knew a lot of stuff in theory, but actually feeling it. And that's something that I had told myself that I'm going to try and do before you popped up. I'm like, okay, I have to listen to my body, because I'll just mention this because I'm sure moms or entrepreneurs have thought this. That, you want to go to the bathroom. You're like, oh, in a minute. So like we tell, our people that you have to listen to your body, but I actually wasn't listening.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. I don't know. I guess I sidetracked from the question, but
no, I'm tracking. I mean, the embodiment piece, number one, is huge. And that's one of the core foundations we start with. Cause I think you're right. People who are high level performers or healers or moms who they know a lot of things, but that's very different than like bringing that knowing here. It's one thing to intellectualize, it's another to actually integrate. And that's where I think what I'm hearing you say in Project Lioness is bridging that gap, because we can know all the things and do all the things, and yet is your nervous system actually digesting it? Right? We can say that we intellectually healed the wound, but have we actually integrated the wound to our wisdom? And also what you're speaking to is like, we can look at the past and reconfigure it and shift our perceptions. And then there's kind of like this, like, okay, now what? And that's interesting you bring that up. But of course, the synchronicity, a lot of people I'm talking about for this next round, they're like, yeah, I feel like I've done a lot of work in my past, but I'm also like, what is my mission? What is my future? And I know we talked about that on some of our calls, was like, yeah, where is my purpose, or where do I feel called, or what is my mission on this planet? Because again, it's one thing to like really feel solid in your past and you wouldn't change it and you love it. It's another like, okay, how do we start to recalibrate towards the future in a way that almost is pulling you and it's inspiring you, and you can navigate those support and challenge simultaneously. So I love that. And this podcast is totally okay if there's tangents. It all serves. So
yeah.
How else did it show up for, I know, like you being a chiropractor and seeing a lot of people, how did it start to show up there for you?
Well, because I'll just comment like on this from what you said before, having done the work but now I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was telling like now, like the work, as in the inner work, it's gotten like, it's very different. Like it's just very different. I can maybe use the word like more detailed or more subtle, but also in this at the same time, like much more deep.
Yes.
And like deep, maybe. I can say.
No, I hear, because I have that experience too. Once you clear kind of the big rocks, there's still pebbles, or even in the moment, you start to look at things differently. And what Loula's speaking to y'all, just so you're like, the work, what are you talking about? There's a specific methodology that I bring the Lioness students through to teach them how to start to master those subtle energies and emotional charges, and really master the game of presence and not get caught up in what I say drama, but linking it to your dharma, or as Loula said earlier, the turbulence, right? The emotional turbulence. And I think what you're speaking to, the subtleties, is, we override that, but it's so key. It's so like, those are the shifts in your nervous system. Like when you become attuned to the subtleties, it is quite profound how deep it can go. And I'm sharing this because that's what I've noticed, because I'm a student in the game still too with y'all. And even just those micro shifts, it's like, wow, that's cool. Like you almost become even more grateful for the subtleties because you've cleared some of the boulders out of the way. So thank you for speaking to that.
And regards to gratefulness, it's something that I experience now much more. This is waves of gratefulness for everything, really. So yeah, that is a reflection of everything that has happened, and really the work. And this is also like quite interesting. Well, when we first started, and I was like, okay, this starts on like Friday.
Yeah.
I asked my sister for her opinion, like, oh, okay, this came up, and I showed her the website.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that other people will relate to this. That's why I mention it. And
Yeah.
she saw it, and she gave me my phone back, and she laughed. I was like, "What is it?" And her words were like, "This is so you, 100%."
Hell yeah. I love that. Oh, and that your sister, like, is she older or younger than you?
She's younger.
Yeah. I love that she also like knows you and like, anyway, keep going. I didn't know that. You haven't shared that with me. That's so cute.
Yeah.
I love that.
So if anybody now is looking through the website and the cohort, it's kind of like, the feelings, also, which you get more. This is something that I have noticed as well, which relates to, being a mom or being a partner and a business owner, that connecting more to my inner wisdom and the intuition. So that inner voice that was telling me, and obviously told me, this is what you need right now. And I was like, oh, fuck, like, this is what I need. And, I say like, oh, fuck, in a very good way. Before you know that this is what you need to do, which is not always a very easy, comfortable process, but this is what you actually need to go where you want to go. So yeah, listen to the voice for sure.
I that's actually very well said, because so often I think there's a distinction. What I'm hearing is the inner critic or your mind versus like your intuition. And I'm illuminating this to you, how profound what you're speaking to, if that will resonate with other people, is your intuition, and that deep knowing may actually be informing you of something that your ego doesn't want to hear. But deep down, it is. I'm working through that right now with things that I'm moving through, and I'm like, okay, I know this is the next step. And yet there's a part of us that will often want to stay in comfort of like, oh, it's fine. And, it's important to have stability while simultaneously that inner knowing of like, hey, this is your next quantum leap. This is your next chapter. Because as human beings, we want stability, but we also want to grow. And so what you're speaking to, I think, is important for the listeners of, hey, and I love hearing this perspective from you, because when I was creating Project Lioness, I said, I really want this to call to people, not from like, yeah, this is my next business move and I'm going to like make more money. And like, that is an outcome for some people for sure. And I want it to pull at something deeper. I want them to feel, as they work through what's included and they read it and they connect with me, I want them to feel that pull from within versus like trying to logically figure it out. And you jumped in, you're like, I kind of have an idea of what this is, but I also have no fucking clue, but I'm going to trust that inner knowing. And I think that's just really cool to hear from your perspective. Again, some things I'm learning that you went through, that's like, wow, that's so cool to see it. The open loops to the closed loops, right? That we talk about. It's like super cool to connect with the graduates of like what your experience was, even jumping in and facing some of those fears or doubts and be like, you know what, I know, and I'm going to trust this. And what I tell people is like, look, if this feels like a calling to you, I even tell students, I'm like, part of your experience of saying yes to this is like you starting to work through stuff, even in the moment you say yes. I tell people like the moment we get on a call, the work's already begun. You don't have to wait to like start learning. So thank you for that reflection. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I wanted to mention it.
That was my intention. So intention fulfilled, Loula. Intention fulfilled. So I love hearing how it's really impacted you as a business owner and as a woman. How have you seen the work we've done in going through the cohort and now being a graduate? How have you seen that shown up in being a parent and being a mom for, your son at the moment?
Mm-hmm. We say that it's actually the embodiment part of actually doing the thing that we all say, like, oh, you need to take care of yourself, or you need to, be well in order to parent well and give the example. So actually embodying that and doing that and committing, it's just on so many levels. Like, for example, realizing your values and structuring your day and using the lexicon that you want on how you live your daily life. For example, like, being able to spend the morning and go to the playground with son, or just, cook and play and read, and actually being there and not worrying about other stuff, or not thinking about other stuff, and taking care of myself and all my other needs as well, now that he's a little bit older. So yeah, I mean, I can say now that I am a completely different version compared to who I was before I had a kid. And I am getting to know this new version, and I'm really liking it. And I am excited also for what the future holds. But one of the things also that is a big takeaway from doing the cohort afterwards, and where it's kind of like led me, is also really connecting that intuition and the feminine energy and womanhood overall, and the power it has within it, and the wisdom also that is in all of us. So being able to connect to that source and being driven from that, but not only on a theoretical model, like feeling it.
Yeah. The practical, right?
Yeah.
Love that. So well said. And the power of presence with your family, which I know has become a higher value for you over, I'm sure, the years. And I think the more present we can be, that's where the secret sauce is to what we're quote unquote seeking in life. It's all available right here, right now. So I love hearing how it's shown up for you, and even just having that transmit to your family and the benefit that they gain of you being a present mom and being an embodied mom. And I know you chiropractors know, and some of you who listen to this, we have a lot of episodes that we talk about the importance of the parents being regulated, because our kids, and Loula, I know you know this, I'm sure you teach your clients and patients, as parents are regulated and connected, whether, they're solo parenting or they're with their partner, kids learn through that. They learn through witnessing behavior. So that's definitely, I like to build that into the program, because there are people who join who are parents. There are people who join who are not parents, but at the end of the day, beyond parenthood, who we are as human beings first, and connecting with the world around us, it's important for us to feel that love for ourselves, as you said. And I know that was a big thing you and I worked on in the beginning, was like, okay, there's this new version of me. Like, I feel this like shattering, this disintegration. How do I start to reintegrate and become whole and love this? I wouldn't even say it's a new version, but maybe a more expanded and embodied version of you that was always in there. And as nature does, sometimes we need the forest fire or the supernova or things to collapse in order to recreate ourselves from a whatever word is resonating with you. It could be grounded, it could be embodied, it could be expanded, it could be more present. But sometimes we gotta, shatter the shell, so to speak, to really re-find ourselves and rediscover ourselves. So that's beautifully said.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else that you feel like you want to share, Loula? If someone was curious, interested, or they're feeling this something, whatever it is from within, and I'll teach you guys what it is if you join, right? What would you share with them from their heart if they're in that choice point, or they're feeling that call to, not even with Project Lioness, but something new that maybe feels like a stretch or it feels different? What would you share with them from your heart?
Just do it.
Nike.
And
we're not endorsed by Nike.
I mean, because if I think back to the last biggest thing for me, which was participating in the cohort, there were so many excuses that I could have, grabbed onto. I mean, the time difference. It was just on bedtime. How is the kid going to sleep? What's going to happen?
This girl would show up on calls, by the way, I don't know, it had to have been close to 10 o'clock at night for you at times.
Yeah.
8, 9, 10,
yeah.
And she's got a freaking baby. So talk about, overriding those excuses and making it work. Continue. Sorry.
And everything, everything, turned out absolutely fine. But just before, there were a lot of things trying to contradict that inner knowing. So if I hadn't done it, I'm sure this time around, that inner knowing would be even louder. But I mean, if you recognize it, you just do it. The sooner the better, whatever that is. And because things are going to come the way that they should in order for you to get the lesson that you need.
Yeah. Well said, my friend. And what I want to add to that too, to expand on your brilliance and wisdom and your inner genius, your zone of genius, the knocking of your intuition, y'all, it doesn't go away. As Loula said, it will show up in another form. Because it's there for us to wake up to it. And so, yes, it may go dormant for a moment, but it's like a whack-a-mole. If you don't listen to that little tap, it will then often become a scream and wake you up to hey, this is an opportunity. And I love what you spoke to, the things we face in life, okay, how is this going to work with bedtime? How am I going to make this work with my business? Can I make the call times work? That's all that stuff will reveal itself. And the way I speak to this in the cohort is starting to see the cohort like a dojo of how you show up in Project Lioness, asking the question, how can I start to translate this to my life? Are you someone who lets the chaos of a schedule get to you? Okay, here's an opportunity for you to start to work through that, because it is a commitment. Project Lioness definitely is a commitment. And there's calls and there's homework and our private community that we get to connect with each other. And so I like to create that dojo. So it's okay, how do I translate this over here in my business, right? Do I feel like I have my schedule in order? Am I living in alignment with my highest values? Am I falling victim to people projecting their stuff onto me and letting the lower priority things take over, in which I'm feeling chaotic? I have physiological stuff going on. I have health challenges, right? So I love that you spoke to that, Loula, because it's important to start to see how you show up in one thing is really a microcosm of the macrocosm of how we can actually show up in the bigger game of our life. So well said, my friend.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Can I say one more thing? Yeah,
absolutely.
In case other European people are interested, and I feel privileged to say this because I'm from Greece, but I was born in the States, and I'm also on paper American. I have loads of family there, so I just wanted to mention that the Americans for us Europeans can seem a little bit sometimes a bit too much. But I wanted to say that you are not like that. And this is the real deal. And I had told you in our first call, like, it is very profound. And I am very happy and grateful for this.
Oh, you're going to make me cry. I'm glad I'm not too much. See, I'm just learning all these things from Loula in this freaking podcast. This is amazing. I'm like, who's the student? Who's the teacher? Clearly you're a graduate. So yeah, European friends, listen to Loula. Yeah. I love, the times I've gone over to Europe. I absolutely love it. So we do welcome you into Project Lioness, and we trust that if the timing, or rather if this feels called to you, if you feel called to this, and there's a synchronicity, we trust the timing will work out. And I want to add, this will be a 3-hour podcast, you guys. One of the first calls I'll never forget, like seeing like a part of you, like I love seeing all the parts of my students, like the funny parts and the serious parts. And I think we did our first breakthrough and embodiment one-on-one session. And at the end, I was like, did you find value or whatever? And you're like, this is impressive. Because she had done a lot of work. You had done a lot of work. And I just was like, thank you. Like, I didn't really know how to respond. But it was like the most real, straight thing that I really appreciated as a facilitator, because I think sometimes when you work with a coach, I try to set the tone of like, be real with me, be straight with me. What do you need? What's working? What's not working? Because I'm here to learn with you. So love it, Loula. Yeah. Okay, you guys. Well, anything else? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this episode up and get on with our days. Lou's going to go be with her family.
We're good.
We're good. Okay. Well, as you all know, this is another episode of the Project Lioness podcast. Loula, if people are curious to find you, can they connect with you on Instagram? Because I do know sometimes people, when they're students, sometimes they like to connect with the graduates. So is that a good way? I can drop your link in the show notes.
Yeah, on Instagram is better.
Yeah, I think you're Live Love Loula, right? At Live Love Loula, Loula.
Correct. Yeah, feel free to shoot me a message or anything. Would be very happy to chat.
Love it. So for those of you considering the program, feel free to reach out to our graduates. I know it's one thing to connect with me. It's another to connect with other people who have gone through it. So I will include all of that information in the show notes for you guys. I will include the application. And thank you, Loula, for joining me. It's such a gift to be in your energy again. I will let you go. For all of our audience, thank you for tuning in. As always, we'll see you in the next episode. Peace, love, and keep inspiring.
Thank you for joining the Project Lioness podcast. Did you find value in today's episode? Help us impact the lives of others by sharing this podcast with someone you know who would resonate and benefit from the Project Lioness message. Excited to hear more? We invite you to subscribe on whatever platform you're tuning in on. And we'd be so grateful for you to leave us a review about what you enjoy most, as well as what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you so much for all of your support. Sincerely yours in power, purpose, and play. Dr. Mel with the Project Lioness podcast. Keep rising, keep roaring, and keep inspiring.